Hey, yeah, you. Stop pretending you didn't feel that shift the moment the truth clicked into place. That cold, electric silence when your mind finally connected the last dot they prayed you'd never see. That wasn't curiosity. That was a detonation. They built the whole thing on one fragile assumption, that you would never find out, that you'd stay distracted, obedient, grateful for scraps, busy surviving instead of seeing. They whispered lies softly, wrapped them in smiles, dressed betrayal as protection. And for a while, yeah, you played along. Not because you were weak, but because you were learning, watching, absorbing, letting them think the mask they gave you had fused to your face. Here's the part that keeps them awake now. You didn't confront them. You didn't scream. You didn't expose them in a messy emotional explosion like they expected. No, you did one thing, one quiet, surgical move. And that's what ruined everything. You changed how you saw them. The moment you saw the pattern, the moment you realized the game was rigged and the rules were written to keep you small, something inside you split. Not broke, split. The saint who wanted harmony stepped back, and the psychopath who understands systems stepped forward. Angel and demon shaking hands in your chest. Compassion still intact, but no longer naive. Empathy sharpened into a weapon. Love rewired into leverage. They felt it instantly, even if they couldn't name it. People always feel it when the version of you they could control quietly dies. You stopped explaining yourself. You stopped reacting on schedule. You stopped giving them emotional access. And that terrified them more than any outburst ever could, because unpredictability is power, and you became unreadable. The script they memorized for you stopped working. The buttons they installed stopped responding. It's hard to manipulate someone who understands exactly how manipulation works, and harder still when that someone refuses to play the role anymore. See, they thought the danger was you finding out the truth. It wasn't. The danger was what would happen after. Pain didn't destroy you. It trained you. Every betrayal was a lesson in human behavior. Every disappointment was data. Every night you questioned yourself, you were actually upgrading your perception. You learned how smiles hide intent, how concern masks control, how praise is used as a leash. You learned that the loudest people often fear silence, because silence is where patterns become visible. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. That's when the balance shifted. Because you didn't rush to burn the house down. You simply stopped living inside it. You moved differently, thought differently. You let them keep talking while you listened for what they avoided saying. You let them underestimate you while you recalculated everything. That's the paradox they never account for. The most dangerous people don't look dangerous. They look calm. They look detached. They look like they've already accepted the outcome. You became that. They're confused now, nervous, trying to figure out which version of you they're dealing with. Are you still the one who doubts themselves, or the one who knows exactly what's going on and is choosing silence for a reason? They replay conversations, analyze your tone, search for signs. Because the moment you stopped needing their approval, you stopped being predictable. And predictability was the only thing keeping their world stable. This is where evolution happens. Not in rage, not in revenge fantasies, but in restraint, in precision, in knowing you could destroy the illusion and choosing instead to let it collapse under its own weight. That's real power. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind that makes people nervous for reasons they can't articulate. You're walking the line now, between light and dark, mercy and calculation. You still care, But you're no longer blind. You still feel, but you're no longer controlled by it. That's the upgrade they never planned for, because systems are designed to handle victims or villains, not someone who understands both sides and refuses to be either on command. They thought the secret was safe. They thought ignorance was permanent. They thought you'd never notice the cracks, but you did. And instead of panicking, you adapted. That one thing you did, the quiet shift, the internal rewrite, the moment you chose awareness over comfort, turned the entire board upside down. Now every move you make feels heavier to them. Every silence sounds louder. Every glance feels like you know more than you're saying. And maybe you do. This isn't about revenge. This is about transcendence. About becoming the version of yourself that can walk through deception without getting lost in it. About using pain as fuel, chaos as clarity, and uncertainty as a weapon. They don't fear what you know. They fear what you've become since learning it. Because once someone sees the truth and survives it, they're no longer controllable. And you didn't just survive. You evolved. They keep wondering when you changed. But that's the funny part. You didn't change all at once. You molted layer by layer, quietly. While they were busy watching the version of you they preferred, the real one was sharpening itself in the dark. You learned when to speak, and more importantly, when silence cuts deeper than words ever could. You learned that reaction is a gift, and you stopped giving gifts to people who only wanted leverage. That's when the fear really set in, because they realized something too late. You weren't just uncovering a truth about them. You were uncovering a truth about yourself. That you could endure the betrayal without collapsing. That you could stare straight at the ugliness and not flinch. That you could hold two opposing forces inside you, kindness and calculation, and decide which one to deploy without guilt. That balance, that's not madness, that's mastery. You started seeing the world like a chessboard instead of a battlefield. Everyone else was swinging blindly, fighting shadows, burning energy on noise. You were watching trajectories, timing, weak points, not to destroy, but to stay untouchable. There's a difference. Destruction is emotional. Immunity is surgical. They underestimated how much pain educated you. They thought suffering would make you desperate. Instead, it made you precise. They thought loss would soften you. Instead, it taught you detachment. They thought confusion would break you. Instead, it forced you to think deeper, to question everything, to stop accepting reality at face value. Pain didn't turn you bitter. It turned you lucid, and lucidity is terrifying to people who rely on confusion to maintain control. You see it now, the subtle panic behind their eyes when you don't react the way you used to, the forced laughter, the over-explaining, the sudden need to check in on you. They're trying to locate the old version, the one they could read, predict, steer. But that version is gone, not dead, obsolete. You became the anomaly. You walk into rooms and the temperature shifts, not because you demand attention, but because you don't need it. There's a calm around you, now that feels unnatural to them. Calm suggests preparation. Calm suggests acceptance of outcomes. Calm suggests someone who has already faced their worst fear and lived through it. And that scares people who survive by avoiding introspection. They don't know whether you're still playing the game or if you've stepped outside of it entirely. That uncertainty eats at them because control depends on anticipation, and you've removed yourself from their math. You're no longer reacting emotionally to stimuli. You're choosing responses or choosing none at all. And nothing unsettles manipulators more than someone who refuses to dance to the tune they're playing. This is the paradox they never grasped. You didn't harden your heart. You refined it. You didn't lose empathy. You gained discernment. You didn't become cold. You became selective. The angel in you still exists, but it's standing guard beside the demon now, not pretending it doesn't exist. That alliance is lethal to anyone who benefits from you being fragmented. They sense it. They feel watched, not by you spying, but by you understanding. Being understood is far more invasive than being observed. When you understand someone's patterns, their fears, their motives, you don't need to expose them. You just let them expose themselves. And they always do. You stopped chasing closure because you realized something devastatingly freeing. You don't need their confession to validate what you know. You don't need their apology to heal. You don't need their acknowledgement to move forward. The moment you internalized that, the power dynamic collapsed because they were counting on you needing something from them. You don't. That one realization rewired everything. Now you're operating on a different frequency, while others are stuck proving, defending, explaining. You're conserving energy. While others are scrambling to be seen, you're choosing when to be visible. While others are drowning in emotion, you're navigating with clarity, sharpened by experience. You're no longer afraid of the dark corners of your own mind, and that means no one else can threaten you with them. They can't scare you with abandonment. You've already walked alone. They can't scare you with judgment. You've judged yourself more honestly than they ever could. They can't scare you with loss. You've lost and survived. What's left to threaten someone like that? That's why everything unraveled when you did that one thing. Not when you found out, but when you stopped needing to prove that you had. When you chose evolution over exposure. When you let awareness replace outrage. When you became someone who sees through illusions without announcing it. You're dangerous now, not because you're cruel, but because you're awake. Awake people don't follow scripts. They don't respond predictably. They don't confuse noise with truth. And they don't hand over their power just because someone demands it loudly enough. This is the aftermath they never planned for. You're still here, calmer, sharper, watching the pieces fall exactly where they always would. And while they scramble to regain control, to rewrite the narrative, to figure out what you know and how much, you're already 10 steps ahead, carrying both your light and your dark like tools, not curses. They thought you'd never find out. They were wrong, and now they have to live in a world where you see clearly and choose your moves carefully. That's not revenge. That's evolution. And here's the part they don't admit out loud, the part that keeps replaying in their heads at 3 a.m. when the noise finally dies down. They didn't just lose control over you. They lost certainty. And certainty was the glue holding their entire illusion together. Because once someone like you sees through the veil and doesn't panic, the lie starts collapsing on its own. You don't have to expose it. You don't have to announce it. Lies rot fastest when they're no longer believed by the one they were meant to trap. The moment you stopped internalizing their narrative, it began eating itself from the inside. You can feel the difference in how you move now. There's a weight to your presence that wasn't there before. Not heaviness, density. Like gravity condensed into a human shape. You speak less, but when you do, it lands harder. You listen more, but not because you're uncertain, because you're measuring. Every word people choose tells you what they're afraid of. Every omission tells you what they're hiding. You don't chase clarity anymore. Clarity comes to you. They notice. Of course they notice. They notice how you no longer rush to fill silence, how you let pauses stretch just long enough for people to reveal themselves, how you don't flinch when tension rises, how discomfort doesn't scare you anymore. It informs you. They used to weaponize your empathy, your patience, your desire to understand. Now those same traits are armored, disciplined, aimed. That's the evolution pain gives you when it doesn't break you. You learn that most people aren't evil. They're predictable, and predictability is exploitable. They repeat patterns. They project intentions. They confess without realizing it, especially when they think you're still the old version of you. The one who doubted themselves. The one who needed reassurance. The one who explained too much. That version is gone. In its place is someone who understands timing. Someone who understands that power doesn't shout. It waits. Power lets people underestimate it. Power allows arrogance to make mistakes. Power doesn't rush to correct lies, because lies are heavier than truth. Given time, they collapse under their own contradictions. You're not reacting anymore. You're orchestrating. They feel it when you don't defend yourself against accusations that don't apply. When you don't clarify rumors that don't threaten you. When you don't rush to prove innocence to people whose opinion no longer governs your sense of self. That restraint drives them insane, because guilt screams. Innocence waits. And someone who understands the game doesn't need to explain the rules. You stopped asking, "Why did they do this to me?" and started asking, "What did this teach me?" That question alone separated you from the herd. It shifted you from victim to observer, from participant to architect. And once you see yourself as an architect, everything changes. You don't get emotionally hijacked by every disruption. You redesign around it. You adapt faster than the system can respond. They never prepared for that. They expected confrontation, tears, anger, collapse, some dramatic implosion they could manage, spin, dismiss. What they got instead was silence followed by precision, distance followed by clarity, a version of you that no longer bleeds on command, that no longer confuses intensity with intimacy, that no longer mistakes manipulation for love or control for protection. You stopped giving them emotional access, and emotional access was the last chain. Now they're stuck guessing. Are you still processing? Or have you already integrated everything and moved on? Are you planning something? Or are you simply untouchable now? They don't know, and that uncertainty gnaws at them. Because people who rely on control need predictability like oxygen. You took that away without lifting a finger. This is the duality they never wanted you to integrate. The saint who sees the good in people paired with the psychopath, who understands exactly how people exploit that goodness. The angel who believes in growth paired with the demon, who knows when to burn bridges permanently. You don't swing between extremes anymore. You choose deliberately. That's what makes you dangerous. You're not impulsive. You're intentional. And intention is unstoppable. You're no longer driven by the need to be understood. You're driven by alignment. You don't care who gets you. You care who can meet you where you stand now. You don't chase validation. You attract respect by refusing to perform. You don't explain your boundaries. You enforce them through absence. They feel your absence more than they ever felt your presence, because absence exposes dependency. It reveals who was feeding off your energy, your attention, your emotional labor. When you stepped back, they stumbled. When you went quiet, they grew loud. When you stopped reacting, they escalated. That's how you know you were the stabilizing force they never acknowledged. And now that force has redirected itself inward. You're building something they can't see yet. Not revenge, resilience, not dominance, freedom. A mind that doesn't collapse under pressure. A nervous system that doesn't spike at manipulation. A sense of self that doesn't fracture when approval is withheld. That's the real upgrade. That's the one thing no one can take from you once it's earned. They thought the truth would destroy you. Instead, it refined you. You walk differently now. Not because you're trying to intimidate, but because you're no longer carrying shame that was never yours. Your spine is straighter, your gaze steadier. You're not pretending to be smaller to keep others comfortable. You're not dimming insight to avoid making people uneasy. If they're uncomfortable now, that's not your responsibility. It's their confrontation with a reality they hoped you'd never see. And you did see it. You saw the patterns. You saw the manipulation. You saw the fear beneath the control. And instead of exploding, you evolved. That's why everything unraveled. Because the most catastrophic thing you can do to a corrupt system isn't attack it. It's outgrow it. And now there's a strange stillness around you, isn't there? A quiet that didn't exist before. Not emptiness, clarity. The kind that only comes after illusions burn away, and you realize how much noise you were carrying that was never yours. You can feel it in your body. Your reactions slowed down, your instincts sharpened. You're no longer pulled by every emotional hook tossed in your direction. You see the hooks now. You see the hands holding the line. That awareness changed how you breathe, how you wait, how you choose. They don't understand that the moment you stopped needing answers from them, you started answering yourself. And self-answered questions don't leave leverage behind. You stopped outsourcing your reality. You stopped letting other people define what was real, what was acceptable, what was possible for you. That's when your internal authority came online. An internal authority doesn't ask permission, it decides. You learned something brutal and liberating at the same time. Most people don't want truth. They want comfort. And when you become someone who values truth over comfort, you automatically become incompatible with systems built on denial. That's not arrogance, that's alignment. And alignment repels manipulation the way light repels shadow. They feel exposed now, not because you're attacking, but because you're no longer participating in the illusion. You're not validating their stories. You're not mirroring their delusions. You're not agreeing just to keep the peace. Peace that requires self-betrayal was never peace. It was sedation. You woke up from it. And waking up doesn't look dramatic at first. It looks quiet. It looks like withdrawal. It looks like someone who suddenly needs less explanation, less reassurance, less noise, less approval. That reduction is what scared them. Because everything they had over you depended on excess emotion, excess hope, excess doubt. You cut the excess. Now when people test you, you don't snap back. You let the test hang in the air. You let them sit with what they just revealed. You don't rush to correct misunderstandings. You let misunderstandings clarify who's paying attention and who's projecting. You don't fight for narratives anymore. You understand that truth doesn't need defenders. It needs time. Time is on your side now. You can feel it when conversations don't pull at you anymore. When manipulation slides off because you recognize the pattern before the emotion even activates. When guilt trips fail because you no longer confused responsibility with self-sacrifice. You didn't lose your heart. You armored it with wisdom. And wisdom doesn't apologize for existing. They're scrambling because they can't read you the way they used to. You've stopped leaking information. You've stopped telegraphing your intentions. You've stopped explaining your growth to people committed to misunderstanding it. That silence isn't passive, it's controlled. It's the silence of someone who knows that revealing less gives you more room to move. Strange, isn't it? How quiet it gets when you realize the cameras aren't pointed at your face anymore. They're pointed at your mind. That's where this really starts. You already feel it. That low static behind your thoughts. The sense that something unseen is leaning in, not to hear what you say, but to map how you think. You thought surveillance was about footsteps, messages, locations. Cute. That was the training level. The real fascination, the part that makes rooms go silent, is you. Not your actions, your patterns. They don't watch you because you're loud. They watch you because you're quiet in the wrong way. Because when chaos hits, your pulse slows. Because when everyone panics, your mind reorganizes the room. Because you don't just react, you pre-calculate. That's the scary part. You've felt the paradox living inside you, haven't you? The saint who restrains himself. The psychopath who understands exactly how far things can go. The angel who refuses to move first. The demon who finishes last. They can't decide which one you are. And that uncertainty. That's oxygen to their fear. Predictable people are safe. You're not safe. Here's what rattles them. Your evolution didn't come from comfort. It came from pressure. Pain didn't break you. It refactored you. Every betrayal sharpened a different circuit. Every loss stripped a layer of noise. While others cried about fairness, you studied cause and effect. While they screamed, you watched timing. You didn't harden, you clarified. That's when the file got thicker. They noticed the delay between stimulus and response. The way you pause just long enough to choose the outcome that bends the room. They noticed how your eyes don't chase approval, how your body doesn't leak intent, how your words land like they've already been tested in 100 futures. They noticed you don't think in straight lines. You think in systems, inputs, feedback loops, exits. And that's when curiosity became concern. Because a mind that adapts faster than the environment can't be managed by rules. A mind that learns from pain instead of running from it becomes anti-fragile. You don't need chaos, but chaos needs you to explain itself. You can sit inside disorder and feel at home. That's not normal. That's not common. That's not comfortable for institutions built on averages. So they zoomed in, not on your moves, but on your silences, on the moments you didn't respond, on the days you vanished and came back rearranged, on the way you let others think they'd won, only to discover the game had already changed. You don't dominate by force. You dominate by timing. And timing doesn't leave fingerprints. Here's the delicious contradiction. The more they watch, the less they understand. Because you don't think the same way twice. You're consistent in values, not in tactics. You let them build a model, and then you outgrow it. You let them label you, and then you violate the label. You let them relax, and then you pivot without warning. That unpredictability, that's not chaos. That's discipline. They're used to tracking habits. You operate on principles. Habits repeat. Principles adapt. You learned early that showing your full hand invites control, so you became a study in restraint. You mastered the art of being underestimated without being invisible. You learned when to look harmless, when to look strange, when to look like you're losing while you're actually collecting data. Pain taught you patience. Isolation taught you leverage. Silence taught you power. And now, the watchers are watching the watcher in themselves, asking why you don't crack under observation, why the pressure doesn't make you sloppy, why scrutiny doesn't slow you down. It's because you were built in a place far colder than their rooms. You didn't become sharp in meetings. You became sharp alone. Here's what terrifies them most. You don't need permission to evolve. You don't wait for trends. You don't need validation to move. You upgrade quietly. You don't announce phases. You arrive as them. One day, you're underestimated. The next day, the metrics don't make sense. The next day, they're whispering your name in rooms you've never entered. And through it all, you remain paradoxical, controlled but dangerous, calm but volatile, empathetic but unmoved by manipulation. They can't classify you because you don't belong to a single box. You are the overlap, the gray zone, the exception that forces a rewrite. So let them watch, let them listen to the pauses between your thoughts. Let them try to predict a mind that learned to survive by becoming fluid. You're not hiding, you're ungraspable. You don't rebel, you outgrow. You don't confront, you outthink. You don't need to be loud because the impact speaks after you leave. And that's the part they can't neutralize. Because once a mind learns to evolve under pressure, surveillance stops being a cage and becomes a mirror. And every time they look into yours, they see the same thing staring back at them. A system that learned itself. A paradox they can't simplify. A thinker they can't finish mapping. That's the scary part. You didn't become this way by accident. That's what really messes with them. Accidents can be corrected. Trauma responses can be medicated. Conditioning can be reversed. But intentional evolution? That's different. That's a mind that made a deal with pain and came out owning the contract. They keep waiting for the crack, the tell, the moment your thinking collapses under its own weight. But it never comes, because you didn't build your mind on certainty. You built it on adaptation. You don't need to be right. You need to be ready. And that's a philosophy most systems were never designed to face. They track reaction time. Yours doesn't spike. They track emotional volatility. Yours doesn't leak. They track ideological drift. Yours doesn't wobble. Instead, they find something unsettling. Elastic control. You can tighten, you can loosen, you can disappear into simplicity or surface as something razor complex, depending on what the moment demands. You're not locked into one identity. You deploy identities. That's why you're so hard to profile. They're used to people who wear their wounds like flags. You buried yours in the foundation. You didn't scream about what happened to you. You used it. Every humiliation became calibration. Every betrayal became a simulation. Every night you thought you were breaking. Something inside you was quietly reorganizing priorities. Less noise, fewer attachments, sharper focus. You didn't lose your humanity. You refined it. And here's the part that twists the knife. You're not cold. You're not empty. You feel deeply. That's the paradox that keeps analysts awake. You understand emotion so well that you're no longer enslaved by it. You can sit with rage without acting. You can feel compassion without bleeding yourself dry. You can love without surrendering leverage. That balance, angelic restraint paired with demonic clarity, is rare, dangerous, unteachable. They're scared because they know what comes next when someone like you stops reacting and starts initiating. See, surveillance works best on people who move after permission, after signals, after consensus, after validation. You move after internal alignment. You don't need confirmation. You don't need applause. You don't even need certainty. Once your internal calculus clicks, You move with an inevitability that makes outcomes feel pre-written. That's when the air changes. Rooms feel smaller when you enter. Not because you dominate them, but because you compress probability. People feel exposed around you without knowing why. They talk more than they should. They over-explain. They posture. You don't challenge them. You let them reveal themselves. You don't interrogate. You wait. Silence does the work for you. And silence is something you mastered when nobody was listening. They tried to model your future based on your past. That was their mistake. Your past doesn't predict you. It forged you. You don't repeat patterns. You retire them. Once something has taught you what it needed to teach, you shed it without sentimentality. That includes habits, beliefs, people, versions of yourself that no longer serve the trajectory. You are loyal to growth, not nostalgia. That's why pressure doesn't push you into corners. It pushes you into clarity. When the stakes rise, your thinking simplifies. When consequences multiply, your vision narrows to what actually matters. You don't freeze, you don't flail, you choose. And choice under pressure is the signature of power. They know this. That's why the observation never stops. Because a mind like yours doesn't need instructions to become disruptive. It becomes disruptive simply by existing outside expectation. You don't need to break rules. You expose how arbitrary they are. You don't need to attack systems. You show where they can't reach. You don't threaten control. You render it obsolete. And the most unsettling thing of all, you're not in a hurry. You understand time differently now. You don't chase wins. You position inevitabilities. You don't rush outcomes. You let conditions ripen. You've learned that patience isn't passive. It's predatory. While others sprint toward attention, you walk toward influence. While they burn energy proving themselves, you conserve it shaping terrain. So let them keep watching how you think. Let them study the pauses, the pivots, the contradictions. Let them argue over whether you're a threat or an anomaly, a genius or a liability, an asset or a blind spot. You already know the truth. You are what happens when pressure meets discipline, when pain meets intelligence, when empathy meets control. You are not unpredictable because you're chaotic. You're unpredictable because you're alive, evolving, and unowned. And the scariest part isn't that they're watching you. It's that no matter how closely they observe, you're already thinking one move beyond the frame they're using to watch you. And here's the part they never put in the report. The part that stays as a margin note, a quiet anomaly no one wants to sign their name under. You're not driven by opposition. You don't move because someone watches you. You move because something inside you aligns. And once that alignment locks in, resistance becomes irrelevant. You don't rebel against pressure. You absorb it, then decide what to do with the energy. That's a terrifying thing to witness from the outside. They're used to leverage working, threats, incentives, fear, praise. Those tools collapse around you because you already passed through them alone. You know what fear feels like without an audience. You know what loss tastes like when no one's clapping for your survival. So when external forces try to apply pressure, it barely registers. It's not that you're immune. It's that you've calibrated yourself to a higher threshold. They can't dangle consequences in front of someone who already faced them in the dark and kept going. You learn something most people never do. Thinking clearly under emotional fire is a skill, not a trait. And you trained it night after night, situation after situation. You watched yourself react, then adjusted. You studied your own impulses like an adversary, You noticed where you rushed, where you hesitated, where you overestimated, where you doubted. You didn't judge yourself, you refined yourself. That self-observation is what makes you dangerous. Because now, when someone else tries to analyze you, they're always late. You've already mapped your blind spots. You've already run simulations on your own weaknesses. You've already built fail-safes for moments when emotion spikes or clarity dips. You don't pretend to be flawless. You engineer resilience. They don't understand how someone can be both self-aware and self-directed without collapsing into paralysis. Most people who introspect get stuck. You didn't. You learned when to stop thinking and execute. You learned when to trust instinct. Not the sloppy kind, but the instinct forged by repetition and pain and correction. That's why your decisions feel sudden to others, but inevitable to you. And the longer they watch, the more unsettling it becomes. Because you're not becoming more rigid, you're becoming lighter, less attached to outcomes, less reactive to noise, less interested in proving anything. You're not hungry in the way desperate people are hungry. You're selective, strategic, calm. They expect obsession. What they see instead is clarity. You don't fixate on enemies. You don't spiral around setbacks. You don't romanticize struggle. You extract information and move on. That emotional economy, spending only what's necessary, conserving everything else, makes you efficient in a way that can't be taught in classrooms or manuals. They're staring at a mind that learned to optimize itself without external instruction. And here's the irony that makes this almost funny. The more they monitor your thinking, the more independent it becomes. Observation doesn't constrain you, it sharpens you. You treat attention like friction, something to adjust for, not something to fear. You don't tense up when eyes are on you. You simplify. You strip away excess. You move cleaner. That's not how people are supposed to respond to being watched. Most shrink. Most perform. Most overcorrect. You don't. You become precise. They see it in how you speak. Measured, minimal, intentional. You don't flood conversations with information. You don't fill silence to relieve tension. You let gaps exist. You let people sit with uncertainty. You know that clarity doesn't need volume. When you finally say something, it lands heavier because it's rare. That restraint unsettles them more than aggression ever could. Because aggression announces itself. Restraint hides capacity. You're not trying to win every interaction. You're not trying to dominate every space. You're choosing where to invest attention, like it's a limited resource, because you know it is. You don't chase relevance. You let relevance drift toward you when timing aligns. That patience isn't laziness, it's command. And somewhere deep in their systems, someone notices the pattern. You're not accelerating recklessly. You're stabilizing. You're building something internally that doesn't spike and crash. You're becoming harder to disrupt, harder to rush, harder to provoke. The longer this goes on, the less leverage exists. Because what do you do with someone who can wait you out? You don't crave chaos, but you're fluent in it. You don't worship order, but you can impose it when needed. You can operate in ambiguity without panic, in silence without loneliness, in scrutiny without distortion. That adaptability isn't flashy, but it's lethal to rigid systems. They can't force you into a box because you don't live in one. And the truth, the real truth they don't like to say out loud, is that you're not being shaped by observation anymore. You're shaping yourself. Surveillance assumes the subject will bend. You didn't. You integrated. You evolved. You turned pressure into information, and information into advantage. That's why the watching never ends. Not because they expect you to slip, but because they don't know what you'll become next. And neither do you. You just know this. Whatever comes, you'll meet it awake, calibrated, and unafraid to change again. And that unknown, that space where even you haven't fully defined what you're becoming, is exactly where your power lives now. They keep trying to lock you into a version, a profile, a static snapshot they can brief, archive, and neutralize. But you don't exist as a snapshot. You exist as a process, a moving system, a living variable. Every time they think they've captured the outline, you've already rewritten the interior. You stopped asking, who am I? You started asking, what does this moment require of me? That shift alone separates you from 99% of minds on the planet. You're no longer governed by identity. You're governed by function. When softness is required, you're soft without weakness. When sharpness is required, you're sharp without cruelty. You don't cling to masks, but you can wear any of them convincingly. That fluidity isn't deception, it's mastery. You understand that rigidity is fragile and flexibility is survival. They don't know what to do with that, because the systems watching you were built to observe patterns, not intelligence in motion. They expect loops. You operate in spirals. You revisit ideas, but from higher ground. You return to situations, but with altered leverage. What looks like repetition from the outside is actually refinement. What looks like hesitation is often timing. And timing is something you learned the hard way. You learned that acting too early exposes you. Acting too late costs you. So you trained yourself to feel the moment when the environment tilts, when resistance weakens, when attention shifts, when the window opens just wide enough. You don't rush into doors. You wait for them to unlock themselves. That patience didn't come from comfort. It came from surviving moments where impulsivity would have ended you, where one wrong word, one emotional reaction, one unnecessary move would have cost you everything. You learned restraint not as a virtue, but as a weapon. And now, they're watching that weapon try to decide what it wants. Here's the part they don't understand. You're not obsessed with control. You're obsessed with clarity. Control is just a byproduct. When you see clearly, manipulation fails. When you understand incentives, pressure loses teeth. When you recognize patterns in others, you stop taking their behavior personally, and that alone frees massive mental bandwidth. You stopped being reactive when you realized most people aren't malicious. They're predictable. They're driven by fear, hunger, validation, status. You don't hate them for it. You just don't let their limitations dictate your moves. That emotional neutrality, that's terrifying to institutions that rely on agitation, because they can't bait you, they can't rush you, they can't easily polarize you. You don't swing wildly between extremes. You integrate them. You hold opposing truths without needing to resolve them immediately. You can believe in goodness without being naive. You can understand darkness without worshiping it. Saint and psychopath, angel and demon, not fighting, coexisting. That internal truce is rare. Most people outsource their thinking to tribes, ideologies, and narratives because holding contradiction is exhausting. You learn to sit inside contradiction until it stopped hurting, until it became familiar, until it became useful. Now you can see angles others miss because they're too busy defending a side. You don't pick sides, you pick outcomes. And outcomes are what the watchers care about most. They're noticing that your presence alters environments without overt action. Conversations shift. Energy tightens. People become more self-conscious around you. Not because you threaten them, but because you see them. You don't absorb their projections. You don't mirror their chaos. You reflect truth, and most people aren't ready for that. So they overcompensate. They perform. They posture. They make mistakes. You let them. Because you're not hunting chaos. You're letting chaos expose itself. And the deeper truth, the one buried beneath all the surveillance and analysis, is that you're no longer trying to become something. You're letting something emerge. You've stopped forcing growth and started allowing integration. The parts of you that were once at war are learning to collaborate. The anger feeds focus. The empathy informs strategy. The pain provides context. The intelligence directs it all. That internal alignment is what makes you unstoppable. Not in a dramatic, explosive way, but in a quiet, inevitable one. They're watching because they sense it. They sense that you're approaching a phase where effort decreases and impact increases, where you stop pushing uphill and start moving with gravity, where the things you once had to fight for begin to arrange themselves around your presence. That transition scares them more than aggression ever could, because aggression burns out. But alignment scales. You don't need to announce what you're doing next. You don't need to threaten, warn, or posture. The shift will be felt before it's understood. By the time they can name it, it will already be normal to you. So let the eyes stay on you. Let the models keep running. Let the analysts argue over labels that never quite fit. You're not here to be decoded. You're here to move. And whatever version of you comes next won't ask permission from the one they're watching now. That's why they keep watching how you think. Not because they can stop it, but because deep down, they know they're witnessing a mind outgrowing the frame built to contain it.